A cage of rich. A sudden gust of wind rattled the loose window frame, sending a shiver down her spine. It was more than just the cold. It was a feeling of being watched, of being drawn into something larger than herself, something connected to the tapestry, to the war, to the very fabric of her being. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that her life, already irrevocably altered by one war, was about to be changed again by a name woven into the threads of another. The question was, would she be strong enough to unravel the truth, or would she become another casualty of the past, lost in the tapestry's silent whispers? She took another step closer, drawn to unraveling the mystery one woven piece at a time. Chapter 2. Threads of the Past. The dampness clung to Genevieve's clothes like a second skin as she re-entered the ruined library. The tapestry, a vibrant island in a sea of gray, dominated the space. The medieval scene depicted a jousting tournament, knights in shining armor clashing lances, their colorful banners fluttering in an imagined breeze. But it was the hidden inscription, the plea for remembrance, that held her captive. Remember Captain Julian Moreau. She had brought a small, battered oil lamp with her, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the walls, making the woven figures seem almost to move. The air was thick with the scent of kerosene and the musty odor of decaying paper. Genevieve carefully placed the lamp on a relatively stable pile of rubble, its light illuminating the lower portion of the tapestry, where the inscription was woven. She had spent hours, days even, painstakingly cleaning the tapestry with a soft brush and a solution of vinegar and water, a recipe her grandmother had used for preserving delicate fabrics. The process was slow, meticulous, but it was also strangely therapeutic. Each brushstroke revealed a little more of the intricate detail, the vibrant colors that had somehow survived decades of neglect and the ravages of war. As she worked, she began to notice other details, subtle anomalies within the seemingly conventional medieval scene. A small, almost imperceptible figure woven into the background, a woman in a simple dress, her face turned away, her hand outstretched as if in supplication. A recurring motif of a single, white rose, woven into the borders of the tapestry, sometimes whole, sometimes with a broken stem. And most intriguingly, a small, almost hidden crest woven into the corner of the tapestry, partially obscured by the frame. Genevieve carefully examined the crest. It was a shield divided into 4 quadrants. 2 of the quadrants were blank, faded beyond recognition. But the other 2 contained symbols, a rampant lion and a fleur-de-lis. The fleur-de-lis, of course, was the symbol of France. But the rampant lion, that was unfamiliar. She racked her brain, trying to recall any family connections to such a symbol. Nothing came to mind. She pulled a small, worn notebook and a stub of charcoal from her pocket. She had started keeping a journal after Philip's death, a way to record her thoughts, her memories, her observations. It was a lifeline in the sea of grief and uncertainty. She carefully sketched the crest, trying to capture every detail. Perhaps someone in the village, someone with knowledge of local history, might recognize it. The rain continued to batter the chateau, the sound echoing through the ruined halls. A sudden crash from above startled her. A piece of the ceiling, weakened by the water, had collapsed, sending a shower of dust and debris raining down. Genevieve quickly moved the lamp, protecting its fragile flame. The incident served as a reminder of the precariousness of her surroundings, of the constant threat of collapse, both physical and emotional. She returned to the tapestry, her gaze drawn back to the inscription. Remember Captain Julian Moreau. Who was he? A nobleman? A soldier? A lover? A traitor? The possibilities swirled in her mind, each more intriguing than the last. She felt a growing sense of urgency, a need to uncover the truth, to understand the connection between this mysterious captain and the tapestry hidden within the ruined chateau. She decided to focus on the woman in the background, the figure with her hand outstretched. There was something about her posture, her hidden face, that suggested sorrow, longing, perhaps even desperation. Genevieve carefully examined the threads that formed her figure, noticing the subtle variations in color, The way the weaver had used different shades of gray and brown to create a sense of depth and shadow. As she studied the figure, she noticed something else. A tiny, almost invisible detail woven into the folds of the woman's dress. A small, silver thread, barely perceptible against the darker fabric. Genevieve carefully traced the thread with her fingertip, feeling a slight prickle as it snagged on her rough skin. She realized, with a jolt of recognition, that the silver thread formed a letter. An M. M. Morrow? Was the woman in the tapestry connected to Captain Julian Morrow? Was she his wife? His lover? His sister? The possibilities were endless, but the M felt like a significant clue, a thread that might lead her closer to the truth. The oil lamp began to sputter, its flame flickering dangerously low. Genevieve knew she had to leave. The chateau was too dangerous at night, especially in this weather. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of a breakthrough, that the tapestry held the key to unlocking a long-forgotten secret. She carefully extinguished the lamp, plunging the library into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon, filtering through the shattered windows. As she turned to leave, she glanced back at the tapestry, its colors muted in the dim light. The inscription, "Remember Captain Julian Morrow," seemed to glow faintly, a silent plea echoing through the centuries. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a sense of connection to this unknown captain, to the woman in the tapestry, to the secrets hidden within the woven threads. She knew she would return. She had to. The tapestry, and the echo of a name, had woven its way into her soul. It wouldn't release her until the whispers turned to a roar. Chapter 3. The Chateau's Secret. The next morning dawned gray and bleak, the rain having finally subsided, leaving behind a world washed clean and dripping. Genevieve, despite a restless night filled with fragmented dreams of tapestries and hidden messages, felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had to return to the Château de Valois to continue her exploration of the tapestry and its secrets. She prepared a meager breakfast of stale bread and weak coffee, her thoughts already racing ahead to the chateau. She decided to take a different route this time, a less direct path that wound through the woods surrounding the estate. It was a longer walk, but it offered more cover, a consideration that had become increasingly important in these troubled times. The war, despite the Allied advances, still cast a long shadow, and rumors of spies and collaborators were rife. As she walked, she considered her options. She needed information. She needed to find someone who might know something about the Château de Valois, about its history, about the Moreau family. The village elder, Madame Dubois, came to mind. She was a formidable woman, well into her 80s, with a memory like an elephant and a sharp tongue that could cut like a knife. She was also the unofficial historian of Valois-le-Petit, keeper of its secrets and stories. The woods were quiet, the only sounds the dripping of water from the leaves and the occasional call of a bird. The air was fresh and clean, a welcome change from the musty confines of the chateau. Genevieve found a certain solace in nature, a reminder of the enduring beauty that existed even amidst the ugliness of war. She reached the chateau by mid-morning, approaching it cautiously from the rear. The ruined gardens were even more overgrown than she remembered, the rose bushes, once meticulously pruned, now a tangled mass of thorns and withered blooms. She made her way to the library, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The tapestry was still there, of course, seemingly untouched by the night storm. The weak sunlight filtering through the shattered windows illuminated its vibrant colors, making the medieval scene appear almost lifelike. Genevieve set about her work, carefully examining the section of the tapestry where she had discovered the hidden gem. She decided to try a different approach this time. Instead of focusing on the individual threads, she stepped back, trying to view the tapestry as a whole, to see if any other patterns or symbols emerged. She circled the tapestry slowly, her eyes scanning its surface, searching for any clue, any hint that might shed light on its mystery. As she reached the opposite side of the tapestry, something caught her eye. A section of the weaving, near the top, seemed slightly different from the rest. The threads were looser, the colors slightly faded, as if it had been repaired at some point. Genevieve carefully examined the area, running her fingers over the uneven surface. She felt a slight indentation, a small bump beneath the threads. She carefully probed the area with her fingertip, feeling a hard object beneath the fabric. Her heart skipped a beat. She realized, with a growing sense of excitement, that something was hidden behind the tapestry. She carefully pulled back the edge of the tapestry, revealing a small, wooden panel set into the wall. The panel was old, its wood darkened with age. It was secured by a simple latch, which she easily unfastened. With trembling hands, she pulled open the panel, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a small, leather-bound book. It was old, its pages yellowed and brittle. Genevieve carefully lifted the book from its hiding place, her heart pounding with anticipation. She opened it gingerly, its spine creaking in protest. The first page was blank, but on the second page, written in elegant, faded ink, was a name, Julian Moreau. Beneath the name, a date, 1870. Below that, in a brief statement, a record of service. This was the captain's journal. A wave of emotion washed over Genevieve. She had found it. A tangible link to the mysterious Captain Julian Moreau, a voice from the past. She carefully turned the page, her eyes scanning the faded script. The journal entries were brief, concise, detailing military campaigns, troop movements, and observations on the political climate. It appeared Captain Moreau served during the Franco-Prussian War. As she read, she began to piece together a picture of the man. He was a dedicated soldier, a skilled strategist, a man of honor and integrity. He was also a patriot, deeply devoted to his country. But there was also a sense of melancholy, a hint of sadness that permeated his writings. She continued to read, her eyes scanning the pages, searching for any mention of the woman in the tapestry, any clue that might connect him to the hidden M. She found references to battles, to sieges, to the horrors of war. But there was no mention of a woman, no hint of a personal life. Then, she reached an entry that made her heart stop. It was dated several months before the end of the war. The tapestry is complete, Julian had written. I have hidden it in the chateau, in the secret compartment behind the panel. It is a message, a plea for remembrance. I fear I will not return from this war. I pray that someone, someday, will find it and understand. He then mentioned his fears for his sister and how he hoped the hidden message would help her one day. Genevieve closed the journal, her mind reeling. The tapestry was a message from a dying soldier, a plea for remembrance. And the woman in the tapestry, his sister. The M must have stood for her name. Genevieve felt a surge of empathy for this long-dead captain, a man who had faced the horrors of war with courage and dignity. She also felt a profound sense of responsibility. She had found his message. She had to understand it. She had to honor his plea. She wouldn't let his sister, or him, be forgotten. But how was she, decades later, supposed to fulfill this request? The journal provided dates, names, a war. But what was the true message? Chapter 4. Whispers in the Ruins. The discovery of Captain Julian Moreau's journal had opened a door to the past, but it had also raised more questions than it answered. Genevieve, clutching the fragile leather-bound book, felt the weight of history pressing down on her. She had a name, a date, a war, and a cryptic message about a tapestry and a plea for remembrance. But what did it all mean? She carefully closed the journal, its pages brittle and fragile, and placed it in her satchel, alongside her notebook and charcoal. She needed to get back to the village, to seek the counsel of Madame Dubois, the village elder and keeper of its history. The sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined landscape. Genevieve made her way back through the overgrown gardens, her mind racing. She needed to be careful. The journal was a valuable artifact, a piece of history that could easily be lost or destroyed. She also needed to be discreet. The war had made everyone suspicious, and rumors of spies and collaborators were rampant. She reached the edge of the woods, pausing to survey the surrounding area. The village of Valois-le-Petit lay nestled in the valley below, its houses clustered around the ancient church, its smoke-stained chimneys a testament to the enduring resilience of its inhabitants. The war had taken its toll, but life, somehow, continued. She made her way down the hillside, her steps cautious and deliberate. She reached the outskirts of the village, passing familiar faces, exchanging nods and greetings. But her mind was elsewhere, focused on the journal, on Captain Julien Moreau, on the tapestry and its secrets. She reached Madame Dubois' house, a small, stone cottage with a thatched roof and a neatly tended garden. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sign that the old woman was home. Genevieve hesitated for a moment, gathering her courage. Madame Dubois was a formidable woman, sharp-tongued and fiercely independent. She didn't suffer fools gladly. Genevieve knocked on the door, her knuckles rapping against the weathered wood. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing Madame Dubois, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes sharp and piercing. She was a small woman, barely reaching Genevieve's shoulder, but she possessed an aura of authority that commanded respect. "Genevieve Moreau," Madame Dubois said, her voice raspy with age. "What brings you to my door at this hour?" "Madame Dubois," Genevieve replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I need your help. I have found something important." Madame Dubois raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Important? What could be so important that it couldn't wait until morning?" Genevieve hesitated, unsure how to begin. It's about the Chateau de Valois, about a tapestry, and a Captain Julien Moreau." Madame Dubois' eyes narrowed. "Julien Moreau? That name, it rings a bell. A distant bell." She paused, her gaze fixed on Genevieve.
"Come in, child."
"Come in and tell me everything." Genevieve stepped inside, the cottage warm and cozy, filled with the scent of wood smoke and herbs. Madame Dubois gestured towards a wooden armchair near the fireplace. Genevieve sat down, her body tense with anticipation. "Now," Madame Dubois said, settling into a rocking chair opposite her. "Tell me, what have you found?" Genevieve took a deep breath and began her story. She told Madame Dubois about the ruined chateau, about the tapestry, about the inscription, about the hidden compartment and the journal. She spoke slowly, carefully, omitting no detail. Madame Dubois listened intently, her eyes fixed on Genevieve, her expression unreadable. When Genevieve finished, the old woman remained silent for a long moment, her gaze lost in the flickering flames of the fire. "Julien Moreau," she finally said, her voice soft and distant. "Yes, I remember now. It was a long time ago, before my time, even. But the stories, they lingered." She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. The Moreau family, they were minor nobility, landowners in this region. They fell on hard times, lost their fortune. The chateau, it was abandoned long before the war. But the stories, they spoke of a tragedy. A young captain, lost in the Franco-Prussian War. A sister, left behind. A hidden treasure. Genevieve's heart skipped a beat. A treasure? She placed the leather-bound journal on the table, its presence both comforting and unsettling. It was a tangible link to the past, a voice from beyond the grave. But it was also a dangerous secret, a treasure that could attract unwanted attention. She opened the journal again, her fingers tracing the faded ink. She had read through it several times already, but she felt she was missing something, a crucial detail that would unlock the mystery of the tapestry and Captain Julien Moreau's plea for remembrance. She decided to focus on the entries leading up to the final, cryptic message. She read slowly, carefully, searching for any clue, any hint that might shed light on his intentions. She noticed a recurring theme in his writings, a deep sense of foreboding, a premonition of his own death. He wrote of his fears for his sister, of his desire to protect her, to provide for her future. He also wrote of his love for his country, of his willingness to sacrifice everything for its defense. Then she found it, a small, almost insignificant detail, tucked away in an entry describing a particularly brutal battle. "I have lost my locket," he wrote. "The one with Marie's portrait. It is a small thing, but it was my only connection to her, my only reminder of her face. I pray it has not fallen into enemy hands. Marie, the sister. The M on the tapestry. And a locket containing her portrait. Genevieve's heart skipped a beat. The locket, could it be the key? Could it be the treasure that Madame Du Bois had spoken of? She closed the journal, her mind racing. She needed to find the locket. But where to begin? The journal entry mentioned a battle, but it didn't specify the location. And even if she knew where the battle had taken place, the chances of finding a small locket, lost over 40 years ago, seemed impossibly slim. She stood up, pacing the small room, her thoughts swirling. She needed to find someone who might know more about the battle, about Captain Julien Moreau's movements during the Franco-Prussian War. The local library, such as it was, might have some records, some historical accounts of the conflict. She decided to go to the library the next morning. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead she had. As she prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that someone was aware of her discovery. Madame Du Bois' warning echoed in her mind. You must be careful, there are those who would kill for such a treasure. She extinguished the candle, plunging the room into darkness. She lay in bed, her eyes wide open, listening to the sounds of the night. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside her window, sent a shiver of fear down her spine. She finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with images of tapestries, lockets, and a captain's portrait, fading into the mists of time. The next morning, she awoke to the sound of church bells, their mournful toll a reminder of the ongoing war. She dressed quickly, her mind already focused on the task ahead. She ate a quick breakfast of bread and cheese, her appetite meager. She made her way to the village square, where the small library was located. It was a modest building, a former schoolhouse that had been converted into a repository for books and documents. The librarian, Monsieur Du Bois, no direct relation to Madame Du Bois, though a shared distant ancestor was often cited in village gossip, was a quiet, unassuming man, more comfortable with books than with people. Genevieve explained her request, carefully omitting any mention of the journal or the tapestry. She simply stated that she was researching the Franco-Prussian War, specifically the movements of Captain Julien Moreau. Monsieur Du Bois listened patiently, his brow furrowed in concentration. Moreau, he said, his voice soft and hesitant. I seem to recall that name. Let me see what I can find. He disappeared into the stacks, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Genevieve waited, her heart pounding with anticipation. She paced the small room, her eyes scanning the shelves, filled with dusty tomes and forgotten histories. After what seemed like an eternity, Monsieur Du Bois returned, carrying a stack of books and documents. I found a few references to a Captain Julien Moreau, he said. He served with distinction in the army of the Loire. There are some accounts of the battles he fought in, some maps, some regimental histories. Genevieve's heart leaped with hope. Thank you, Monsieur Du Bois, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. This is very helpful. She spent the next few hours poring over the books and documents, searching for any mention of the battle where Captain Julien Moreau had lost his locket. She found several accounts of his bravery, his leadership, his tactical skills. But there was no mention of the locket, no specific details about the battle where he had lost it. She was beginning to feel discouraged when she came across a small, unassuming pamphlet tucked away in a box of miscellaneous documents. It was a regimental history of the unit Captain Julien Moreau had served in. She opened it gingerly, its pages yellowed and brittle. She scanned the pages, her eyes searching for any clue, any hint that might lead her to the locket. Then she found it. A brief paragraph describing a skirmish near the village of Orleans. Captain Julien Moreau, the paragraph read, was wounded in the fighting. He was taken to a field hospital, where he later died of his injuries. Several of his personal effects were lost during the battle, including a locket containing a portrait of his sister. Orleans. The battle had taken place near Orleans. Genevieve felt a surge of adrenaline. She had a location. She had a starting point. She also felt a deep sorrow. The locket wasn't lost in battle. It was lost near where he was wounded and likely died. This changed things. She now had a very likely area to search and a confirmation of the captain's fate. But where was Marie now? And would finding the locket be enough to fulfill the long-ago whispered promise of a dying man? Chapter 6. Letters from the Front. Orleans. The name echoed in Genevieve's mind, a beacon in the fog of uncertainty. The regimental history had provided a crucial piece of the puzzle, the location of the battle where Captain Julien Moreau had lost his locket and ultimately his life. But Orleans was a large city, even in its war-reduced state, and the surrounding countryside vast. Finding a small locket, lost over 4 decades ago, seemed an almost impossible task. Genevieve, however, was not one to be easily deterred. The image of Captain Julien Moreau, his face drawn with worry, the colonel's expression softened slightly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Julien Moreau," he said, his voice less harsh. "A brave man. A good soldier." He paused, his gaze lost in the distance. "I knew him. I served with him." Genevieve's heart leaped with hope.
You did?
She said, her voice filled with excitement. Do you remember the battle near Orleans? The one where he was wounded?" The colonel nodded slowly. "I remember it well. It was a bloody affair. We were outnumbered, outgunned. Julien, he fought like a lion, but he was caught in a crossfire. He was taken to a field hospital, but it was too late." Genevieve felt a pang of sorrow. She had known he was dead, but hearing it from someone who had been there, who had known him, made it more real, more painful. "I am trying to find something," she said, her voice hesitant. "A locket. He lost it during the battle. It contained a portrait of his sister." The colonel's eyes widened slightly. "The locket," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Yes, I remember. He spoke of it often. It was his most prized possession." He paused, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't know where it might be, but I have some maps. Maps of the battlefield. Perhaps they can help." He stepped aside, inviting her into the cottage. The interior was dark and cluttered, filled with dusty furniture, piles of books, and military memorabilia. The air was thick with the smell of stale tobacco and decay. The colonel led her to a large, wooden table covered with maps and documents. He began to rummage through the pile, his hands trembling slightly. "Here," he said, pulling out a large, faded map. "This is a map of the Orleans region, showing the troop movements during the battle. The field hospital, it was located here, near this small village." He pointed to a spot on the map, a small cluster of buildings near a river. Genevieve's heart pounded with anticipation. She had a location. A specific location. As Genevieve leaned closer to study, a glint of faded color caught her eye from beneath a stack of other documents. The colonel, following her gaze, reached and retrieved the item. It was an aged, fabric-covered book, smaller than Julien's journal. He blew off a layer of dust to reveal the faint title, Letters from Marie. Genevieve and the colonel looked at each other, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. Could this be her? The sister? A collection of letters from the front? She had been told that women didn't fight, that they stayed home and waited. But what if Marie had found a way? The tapestry, the locket, and now this? Suddenly, the mystery of the tapestry deepened further. It became clear to Genevieve that this was more than finding a lost trinket. It was about uncovering a life that had been hidden, a life that was whispering to be revealed. Chapter 7. The Shadow of War. The discovery of letters from Marie added another layer of intrigue to the already complex mystery surrounding Captain Julien Moreau and his sister. Genevieve, holding the fragile, fabric-covered book, felt a surge of excitement mixed with trepidation. Could these letters hold the key to understanding the tapestry, the locket, and the plea for remembrance? Colonel Beaumont, his face etched with a mixture of curiosity and sadness, watched her intently. He had known Julien Moreau, had fought alongside him, had witnessed his bravery and his death. But he had known nothing of Marie, of her letters, of her connection to the tapestry. May I borrow this?" Genevieve asked, her voice trembling slightly. She gestured towards the book of letters. The colonel hesitated for a moment, his eyes clouded with doubt. He was a recluse, a man who had withdrawn from the world, who guarded his possessions jealously. But he also saw something in Genevieve's eyes, a determination, a desperation, that resonated with his own wartime experiences. "Take it," he said, his voice gruff. "But be careful with it. It is a fragile thing." Genevieve thanked him profusely, promising to return the book as soon as she was finished with it. She carefully placed it in her satchel, alongside Julian's journal and the map of the Orleans region. She left the colonel's cottage, her mind racing. She had a location for the battle, a possible location for the locket, and now, a collection of letters from Marie herself. She felt she was on the verge of a breakthrough, that the truth was within her grasp. But as she walked back towards Valois-le-Petit, the shadow of the current war, the great war that had engulfed Europe, loomed large. The distant rumble of artillery was a constant reminder of the ongoing conflict, of the millions of lives lost, of the shattered dreams and broken promises. She passed groups of soldiers, their faces young and weary, their uniforms stained with mud and blood. She saw refugees, their belongings piled high on carts, their eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. She saw the devastation, the ruined buildings, the cratered fields, the scars that the war had etched onto the landscape. The contrast between the two wars, the Franco-Prussian War of Julian's time and the current conflict, was stark. Both were brutal, both were devastating, but the scale of the Great War was unprecedented. The technology of warfare had advanced, making it more efficient, more deadly. The trenches, the machine guns, the poison gas, it was a nightmare beyond anything Julian Moreau could have imagined. And yet, despite the differences, there were also similarities. The human cost of war, the suffering, the loss, the grief, those remained the same. The stories of bravery, of sacrifice, of love and loss, those echoed across the generations. Genevieve reached her cottage, her body exhausted, her mind overwhelmed. She lit a candle, its flickering flame casting long shadows on the walls. She sat at her table, her gaze drawn to the two books, Julian's journal and Marie's letters. She decided to start with Marie's letters. She carefully opened the fabric-covered book, its pages brittle and fragile. The first letter was dated several months before the start of the Franco-Prussian War. It was addressed to Julian, her beloved brother. Marie's handwriting was elegant, flowing, a stark contrast to Julian's more concise, military script. She wrote of her life in Paris, of her social engagements, of her hopes and dreams. She also wrote of her concerns about the growing political tensions between France and Prussia. As Genevieve read through the letters, she began to piece together a picture of Marie. She was a young woman of intelligence and spirit, a woman who yearned for more than the confines of her traditional upbringing. She was also deeply devoted to her brother, Julian, her only sibling. She found references to the tapestry, to Marie's involvement in its creation. It was a collaborative effort, a project that they had undertaken together, a symbol of their bond, their love for each other. Then, she reached a letter that made her heart stop. It was dated shortly after the start of the war. "I have decided to follow you to the front," Marie wrote. "I cannot bear to sit idly by while you risk your life for our country. I have secured a position as a nurse, a volunteer. I know it is dangerous, but I must be near you. I must do my part." Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. Marie had gone to the front. She had disguised herself, perhaps, or used her connections to secure a position as a nurse. She had risked everything to be near her brother, to contribute to the war effort. This explained the tapestry, the hidden M, and the whispered instruction to remember. Julian didn't just worry for his sister. He worried about her safety in the midst of war. She continued to read, her eyes scanning the pages, searching for any mention of Orleans, of the battle, of the locket. She found descriptions of the horrors of war, of the wounded soldiers, of the overflowing hospitals, of the constant fear of death. Then she found it, a letter dated shortly after the Battle of Orleans. "Julian is gone," Marie wrote, her handwriting shaky, her words filled with grief. "He was wounded in the fighting. I was there at the field hospital. I held his hand as he died. He spoke of the locket, of his regret at losing it. He asked me to remember him, to remember us. Genevieve closed the book, her eyes filled with tears. The tapestry, the locket, the plea for remembrance, it was all about Marie. It was about her brother's love for her love for him, their shared experience of war, their tragic loss. The treasure wasn't gold or jewels. It was a story of love, of loss, of remembrance. And it was a story that was far more dangerous than Genevieve had ever imagined. The war had changed Marie, had hardened her, had made her a participant, not just a bystander. And now, decades later, Genevieve was holding the threads of that story in her hands, a story that was about to unravel, revealing secrets that had been buried for far too long. And with those secrets came the real possibility of danger, a danger that was drawing closer with every page she turned. Chapter 8. A Forbidden Encounter. The revelation that Marie Moreau had served as a nurse during the Franco-Prussian War and had been present at Julien's deathbed cast a new light on the entire mystery. Genevieve felt a profound sense of connection to Marie, a kinship born of shared grief and a shared understanding of the devastating impact of war. She spent the next few days immersed in Marie's letters, piecing together her story, her experiences, her transformation from a sheltered young woman into a hardened war nurse. Marie's words were a window into a world that had been hidden from Genevieve, a world of courage, resilience, and unimaginable suffering. She learned that Marie had not only served as a nurse, but had also become involved in the French resistance, using her position to gather intelligence, to aid escaping prisoners, to sabotage the Prussian war effort. She had taken enormous risks, driven by her love for her brother, her hatred of the enemy, and her unwavering belief in the cause of freedom. Genevieve also discovered that Marie had fallen in love. A young French officer, Captain Jean-Luc Dubois, the similar name as the librarian and Madame Dubois sparked a small alarm in Genevieve's head, had captured her heart. Their love affair was passionate, intense, but also fraught with danger. They met in secret, stole moments together amidst the chaos of war, their love a fragile flame in the darkness. But their love was doomed. Captain Dubois was captured by the Prussians, accused of espionage, and executed. Marie was devastated, her grief compounded by the knowledge that she was carrying his child. Genevieve's heart ached for Marie, for her loss, for her pain. She felt a growing sense of urgency to find the locket, to fulfill Julien's plea for remembrance, to honor the memory of Marie and her lost love. She decided to return to Orleans, to the location of the field hospital where Julien had died, where Marie had last seen him. She knew the chances of finding the locket were slim, but she had to try. She packed a small bag, including Julien's journal, Marie's letters, and the map Colonel Beaumont had given her. She also took a small trowel and a brush, tools she might need if she were to search for the locket. She left Valois-le-Petit early in the morning, her journey taking her through war-torn countryside, a constant reminder of the ongoing conflict. She traveled by train, the carriages crowded with soldiers, refugees, and wounded men. She reached Orleans by late afternoon, the city bearing the scars of both wars. The streets were filled with rubble, the buildings pockmarked with bullet holes, the air thick with the smell of smoke and decay. She found a small, unassuming hotel near the train station, a place that had seen better days. She checked in, her heart heavy with apprehension. She spent the evening studying the map, trying to pinpoint the exact location of the field hospital. It was difficult, as the landscape had changed significantly in the intervening years. But she managed to identify a small village, just outside of Orleans, that seemed to match the description on the map. The next morning, she set out for the village, her journey taking her through fields that had once been battlegrounds. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the ground, searching for any sign, any clue that might lead her to the locket. She reached the village by mid-morning, a small cluster of houses surrounding an ancient church. She asked for directions to the site of the old field hospital, her voice trembling slightly. The villagers looked at her with curiosity, their faces etched with the hardship of war. She was directed to a field on the outskirts of the village, a place where a makeshift hospital had once stood. The field was now overgrown with weeds and wildflowers, a peaceful scene that belied the horrors that had once taken place there. Genevieve began to search, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and despair. She used the trowel to carefully dig through the soil, her fingers sifting through the dirt, searching for any sign of the locket. Hours passed, and she found nothing. The sun beat down on her, her back ached, her hands were raw and blistered. She was about to give up when she saw something. A glint of metal, half buried in the dirt. She carefully dug around the object, her heart racing. She pulled it free, her fingers trembling. It was a small, silver locket, tarnished with age, its surface scratched and dented. She opened it gingerly, her breath catching in her throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a miniature portrait of a young woman. Her hair was auburn, her eyes a startling shade of hazel, her face filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. It was Marie. Genevieve recognized her instantly from the descriptions in the letters, from the hidden M on the tapestry. She had found it. She had found the locket. As she held the locket in her hand, she felt a presence, a sense of being watched. She looked up, her eyes scanning the field. Standing at the edge of the field, partially hidden by a clump of trees, was a man. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, his face obscured by the shadows. He was watching her, his gaze intense and unwavering. Genevieve felt a chill run down her spine. Who was he? And why was he watching her? As she looked, he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, before turning and disappearing into the dense undergrowth. He moved with a practiced ease that suggested familiarity with the landscape and with stealth. Was this a warning? A threat? Or a sign of some kind? The encounter left Genevieve shaken, the joy of finding the locket overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was no longer alone in her quest, and that the stakes were far higher and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The shadow of this war had found her, intertwined with the echoes of the past. Chapter 9. The Spy's Revelation. The encounter with the mysterious man in the field left Genevieve deeply unsettled. The sense of being watched, of being followed, clung to her like a shroud. She clutched the locket, Marie's portrait a silent witness to her growing fear. She quickly left the field, her pace hurried, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. She made her way back to the village, her mind racing. Who was that man? Was he connected to Madame Du Bois, to the rumors of treasure, to the current war? She decided to return to her hotel in Orleans, to the relative safety of her room. She needed to think, to reassess her situation. She needed to understand the significance of the man's presence, of his silent observation. She reached the hotel, her heart still pounding. She locked herself in her room, her body trembling. She sat on the bed, her gaze drawn to the locket, to Marie's portrait. She opened the locket again, examining the miniature portrait more closely. She noticed a small inscription on the back of the portrait, barely visible to the naked eye. She used a magnifying glass, which she had brought with her to examine the tapestry, to decipher the inscription. It read, Marie and Jean-Luc, forever. 1870. The inscription confirmed what she had already suspected. The locket was a symbol of Marie's love for Captain Jean-Luc Du Bois, the father of her child. It was a memento of their forbidden love, a treasure that had been lost and now found. But the discovery of the inscription also raised new questions. What had happened to Marie's child? Had the child survived? Were there descendants of Marie and Jean-Luc living somewhere in France, unaware of their family history? Genevieve felt a growing sense of responsibility, a need to uncover the truth, not just for Julien and Marie, but for their descendants. She felt she was being drawn into a web of secrets, a story that spanned generations, a story that was far from over. A knock on the door startled her. She jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. She hesitated, her body tense with fear. Who is it? She asked, her voice trembling. It's me, Genevieve.
Let me in.
The voice was familiar. It was Monsieur Dubois, the librarian from Valois-le-Petit. But how had he found her? And why was he here? She cautiously opened the door, her hand gripping the locket tightly. Monsieur Dubois stood in the hallway, his face pale and drawn. He looked worried, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and fear. Monsieur Dubois, Genevieve said, her voice surprised. What are you doing here? I had to warn you, he said, his voice low and urgent. You are in danger. Madame Dubois, she is not who you think she is. Genevieve's blood ran cold. Madame Dubois, the village elder, the keeper of its secrets. She had suspected something, a hidden agenda, a guardedness that had made her wary. But she had never imagined this. What do you mean? Genevieve asked, her voice trembling. She is a spy, Monsieur Dubois said, his voice barely a whisper. She works for the Germans. She has been using you, manipulating you, to find the treasure. Genevieve felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The treasure. The locket. Madame Dubois had known about it all along. She had used Genevieve, her grief, her curiosity, to find it for her.
But how?
Genevieve asked, her voice faltering. She is related to Captain Jean-Luc Dubois, Monsieur Dubois said, his voice filled with shame. He was her uncle. She has been searching for the locket for years, ever since she learned of its existence. She believes it contains information. Information that could be valuable to the enemy. Genevieve's mind reeled. The locket. Marie's portrait. The inscription. It wasn't just a memento of love. It was something more. Something dangerous. The man, Genevieve said, her voice urgent. The man in the field. He was watching me. Was he working for her? Monsieur Dubois nodded grimly. He is her contact. A German agent. He has been following you, waiting for you to find the locket. Genevieve felt a surge of anger, of betrayal. Madame Dubois, the woman she had trusted, had been using her all along. She had played on her emotions, her vulnerability, to achieve her own selfish goals. We have to get out of here, Monsieur Dubois said, his voice urgent. She knows you have the locket. She will be coming for you. Genevieve nodded, her mind racing. She grabbed her bag, her hand clutching the locket tightly. She followed Monsieur Dubois out of the hotel, her heart pounding with fear. They made their way through the darkened streets, their steps hurried, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. They were being hunted, pursued by a dangerous enemy, an enemy who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. As they hurried through an alley, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the man from the field, the German agent. He blocked their path, his face grim, his hand reaching inside his coat. This was it. The confrontation. Genevieve knew that the locket, and the secrets it held, were about to be tested. The whispers of a tapestry were about to become a roar of danger, and she was caught in the middle, with no escape in sight. The past and the present had collided, and her life hung in the balance. Chapter 10. Beneath the woven words. The German agent, his face a mask of cold determination, stood between Genevieve and Monsieur Dubois and their escape. The narrow alleyway offered no refuge, no way to avoid the confrontation. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of the city and the ragged breathing of the three figures caught in this dangerous standoff. The locket, the agent said, his voice a low growl, his hand still concealed within his coat.
Give it to me.
Genevieve clutched the locket tightly, her heart pounding against her ribs. She knew she couldn't give it to him. She didn't know what secrets it held, but she knew they were important, dangerous enough for Madame Dubois to betray her, dangerous enough for this man to threaten her. I don't have it, Genevieve lied, her voice trembling. The agent's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. I saw you. I saw you find it. He took a step closer, his hand emerging from his coat. He wasn't holding a gun, as Genevieve had feared, but a small, intricately carved knife, its blade gleaming in the dim light. Monsieur Dubois stepped in front of Genevieve, shielding her with his body. Leave her alone, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. She doesn't know anything. The agent sneered.
Move aside, old man.
This doesn't concern you. It does concern me, Monsieur Dubois retorted. She is under my protection. The agent lunged forward, his knife aimed at Monsieur Dubois. Genevieve screamed, her body reacting instinctively. She threw herself at the agent, her shoulder slamming into his side. The agent stumbled, his knife clattering to the ground. Monsieur Dubois, taking advantage of the distraction, grabbed the agent's arm, twisting it behind his back. The agent struggled, his face contorted with rage. Genevieve quickly retrieved the knife, her hand trembling. She held it out in front of her, a desperate attempt at defense. "Stay back," she said, her voice shaking. The agent, realizing he was outnumbered, ceased his struggle. He glared at Genevieve, his eyes filled with hatred. "You may have won this round," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But you won't escape. Madame Dubois, she will find you. And she will get what she wants." Monsieur Dubois, still holding the agent's arm, looked at Genevieve. "We have to go," he said, his voice urgent. "We have to get out of here." They left the agent bound and gagged in the alleyway, his threats echoing in their ears. They hurried through the darkened streets, their destination a safe house that Monsieur Dubois knew of, a place where they could hide, regroup, and decide what to do next. They reached the safe house, a small, nondescript building hidden in a maze of narrow streets. Monsieur Dubois gave a coded knock on the door, and it was opened by a young woman, her face wary, her eyes scanning the surroundings. They were ushered inside, the door quickly bolted behind them. The safe house was sparsely furnished, but it offered a sense of security, a temporary refuge from the dangers outside. Genevieve, still shaken by the encounter, sat down heavily on a chair. She clutched the locket, her mind racing. She needed to understand the secrets it held, the information that Madame Dubois and the German agent were so desperate to obtain. She opened the locket again, examining the portrait of Marie, the inscription on the back. She had already examined it closely, but she felt she was missing something, a hidden clue that would unlock the mystery. She remembered the tapestry, the intricate details, the hidden messages. She remembered the M, the white roses, the crest with the rampant lion, and the fleur-de-lis. She realized, with a sudden flash of insight, that the locket might be connected to the tapestry, that it might contain a similar hidden message. She examined the locket again, her fingers tracing its surface, searching for any anomaly, any irregularity. She noticed that the frame around the portrait was slightly thicker than it appeared. She carefully pried at the frame, her heart pounding with anticipation. The frame came loose, revealing a small, hidden compartment behind the portrait. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper. Genevieve carefully removed the paper, her hands trembling. She unrolled it gingerly, its surface brittle and fragile. It was a small, intricately drawn map, a map of the Château de Valois. But it wasn't just a map of the chateau. It was a map of a specific section of the chateau, the library, the very room where Genevieve had found the tapestry. And on the map, marked with a small X, was a location behind the tapestry, the very spot where she had found Julian's journal. But there was something else. Beneath the X, written in tiny, almost illegible script, were two words, beneath words. Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. Beneath the woven words, the tapestry, the inscription. Remember Captain Julian Moreau. The hidden message wasn't just the inscription itself. It was something beneath the inscription, something hidden within the fabric of the tapestry. The locket wasn't the treasure. It was a key to finding the real treasure, a treasure hidden within the tapestry itself. And now, Genevieve knew where to look. But what would she find? And could she get to it before Madame Dubois? The race was on, and the stakes were higher than ever. The whispers had led her to a map, and the map was leading her back to where it all began. Chapter 11. The Price of Loyalty. The map hidden within the locket had revealed the true location of the treasure, not the locket itself, but something concealed beneath the woven words of the tapestry's inscription. Remember Captain Julian Moreau. Genevieve, her mind racing, knew she had to return to the Château de Valois to the ruined library, to the tapestry that had started it all. But she also knew she couldn't go alone. Madame Du Bois and her German agent were still out there, searching for her, searching for the locket, searching for the secrets it held. She needed help, protection, someone she could trust. Monsieur Du Bois, despite his age and his unassuming demeanor, had proven to be a valuable ally. He had risked his life to protect her, to warn her about Madame Du Bois' betrayal. He had also revealed his connection to the resistance, his commitment to fighting the German occupation. "We have to go back," Genevieve said, her voice firm, her eyes filled with determination. "We have to go back to the chateau." Monsieur Du Bois nodded, his face grim.
"I know.
"But it's dangerous. Madame Du Bois will be expecting us." "We have to be careful," Genevieve said. "We have to be smart. We have to find the whatever is hidden before she does." They spent the rest of the day planning their return to Valois-le-Petit. They knew they couldn't take the train, as it would be too risky. Madame Du Bois would likely have contacts at the station, watching for them. They decided to travel by night, on foot, following back roads and hidden paths. It would be a long and arduous journey, but it was the safest option. They left the safe house under the cover of darkness, their movements cautious, their senses alert. They walked for hours, their bodies aching, their spirits dampened by the cold night air. They reached the outskirts of Valois-le-Petit by dawn, their destination, the Château de Valois, looming in the distance. The ruined chateau, silhouetted against the gray sky, seemed to beckon them, to draw them into its web of secrets. They approached the chateau cautiously, avoiding the main road, sticking to the woods and the overgrown gardens. They reached the ruined library, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The tapestry was still there, seemingly untouched, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the crumbling walls and the decaying furniture. Genevieve approached it, her fingers tracing the woven words, "Remember Captain Julien Moreau." She remembered the map, the X marking the spot beneath the inscription. She carefully examined the tapestry, her fingers searching for any anomaly, any irregularity. She found it. A section of the weaving, directly beneath the inscription, seemed slightly different from the rest. The threads were looser, the colors slightly faded, as if it had been tampered with. She carefully pulled at the threads, her heart racing. The threads came loose, revealing a small, hidden cavity behind the tapestry. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, wooden box. Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. She had found it. She had found the treasure. She carefully removed the box, her hands trembling. She opened it gingerly, its hinges creaking in protest. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, were several items. A small, leather-bound diary, a bundle of letters tied together with a faded ribbon, and a single, dried white rose, its petals brittle and fragile. Genevieve recognized the diary instantly. It was Marie's diary, the continuation of her story, the story that had begun in the letters she had sent to Julien. She opened the diary, her eyes scanning the faded ink. The first entry was dated shortly after Julien's death. Marie wrote of her grief, her despair, her determination to continue her fight against the Prussians. She also wrote of her child, a son, whom she had named Julien, in honor of her brother. She wrote of her love for her son, her hopes for his future, her fears for his safety. As Genevieve read through the diary, she began to understand the true nature of the treasure. It wasn't gold or jewels. It was information. Information about the French resistance, about the network of spies and collaborators that Marie had been involved in. Information that could have been used to defeat the Prussians, to end the Franco-Prussian War. But the information was also dangerous. It contained names, dates, locations, secrets that could have cost Marie and her son their lives. Secrets that were still dangerous, even now, decades later. The letters, Genevieve realized, were from Captain Jean-Luc Du Bois to Marie. Love letters, filled with passion, with longing, with promises of a future that would never be. And the white rose, it was a symbol of their love, a memento of their brief, tragic affair. A symbol that Marie had kept with her all these years. Genevieve closed the box, her heart heavy with emotion. She had found the treasure, but it wasn't what she had expected. It was a story of love, of loss, of sacrifice, of betrayal. It was a story that had spanned generations, a story that was still unfolding. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. Well, well, well. What have we here? Genevieve turned, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the doorway of the library, her face a mask of triumph, was Madame Dubois. And behind her, his knife gleaming in the dim light, was the German agent. "I knew you would come back," Madame Dubois said, her voice dripping with venom. "I knew you would lead me to it." She gestured towards the box. "Give it to me, Genevieve. It's mine. It belongs to my family." Genevieve clutched the box tightly, her body trembling. She was trapped, cornered, outnumbered. But she wouldn't give up. She wouldn't let Madame Dubois win. "It doesn't belong to you," Genevieve said, her voice shaking but firm. "It belongs to Marie. And to her son." Madame Dubois laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "Her son? Her son is dead. He died years ago. There is no one left. Except me." "That's not true," a voice said from behind Madame Dubois. Everyone turned, their eyes widening in surprise. Standing in the shadows, his face pale but determined, was Monsieur Dubois. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a group of men, armed with rifles and pistols. They were members of the resistance, the very network that Marie had been a part of. "Jean-Luc," Madame Dubois whispered, her voice filled with shock and disbelief. "But you're dead. You died years ago." "I am not Jean-Luc, Madame," Monsieur Dubois stated. His voice had lost the timid, librarian tone. Now it carried weight and authority. "I am Julien Dubois, the son of Marie Moreau and Captain Jean-Luc Dubois. My mother hid me, protected me, gave me a new identity, told everyone I had died. She was a spy, Madame, and a very good one. She knew one day someone in your family would come looking, and she entrusted me to keep the secret safe. The price of loyalty. It had been paid by Marie, by Julien, and now by Genevieve. The tapestry, the locket, the letters, the diary, they were all pieces of a puzzle that had finally been solved. But the solution came at a cost. The confrontation was inevitable, the outcome uncertain. The whispers of the past had led to a reckoning in the present, a reckoning that would determine the fate of the treasure and the fate of everyone involved. Chapter 12. A Dance of Deception. The revelation that Monsieur Dubois was, in fact, Julien Dubois, the son of Marie Moreau and Captain Jean-Luc Dubois, sent shockwaves through the ruined library. Madame Dubois, her face ashen, stared at him in disbelief, her carefully constructed facade of village elder crumbling around her. The German agent, his eyes narrowed, shifted his grip on his knife, his gaze darting between Julien and Genevieve. You lied," Madame Dubois stammered, her voice trembling. "You all lied. My mother lied to protect me," Julien corrected, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "She knew your family's greed, your willingness to betray your country for personal gain. She knew you would come looking for the information, for the treasure." "It is my birthright," Madame Dubois retorted, her voice regaining some of its strength. "It belongs to my family. It belongs to France," Julien countered. "It is a record of the resistance, of the brave men and women who fought against the Prussians. It is a testament to their sacrifice, their loyalty, their unwavering belief in freedom." He gestured towards the armed men behind him. "And I will not let you use it to aid the enemy, to betray our country once again." The German agent, sensing the shift in power, took a step back, his eyes darting towards the exit. He knew he was outnumbered, outgunned. But he also knew the value of the information contained within the wooden box, the information that Madame Dubois had promised him. "The information," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Give it to me, and I will leave you in peace." Genevieve, clutching the box tightly, looked at Julien. She saw the determination in his eyes, the resolve to protect the secrets, to honor his mother's legacy. She knew she had to trust him, to believe in him. It's not yours to take, Genevieve said, her voice firm, her gaze fixed on the German agent. It belongs to the past, to the memory of those who fought and died for freedom. The German agent lunged forward, his knife aimed at Genevieve. But Julian was quicker. He stepped in front of Genevieve, shielding her with his body. He grabbed the agent's wrist, twisting it until the knife clattered to the ground. The resistance members, acting swiftly, disarmed the agent and subdued him. Madame Dubois, realizing she was defeated, slumped against the wall, her face a mask of despair. "It's over, madam," Julian said, his voice filled with sadness. "Your treachery ends here." He turned to Genevieve, his expression softening. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "For finding the truth, for honoring my mother's memory." Genevieve nodded, her eyes filled with tears. She had found more than just a treasure. She had found a connection to the past, a connection to a family she had never known. She had found a purpose, a reason to fight, a reason to believe in the future. The resistance members took Madame Dubois and the German agent into custody, their fate to be determined by the authorities. Genevieve and Julian were left alone in the ruined library, the tapestry looming above them, its silent whispers finally understood. Genevieve handed the wooden box to Julian. "It's yours," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It belongs to you, to your family." Julian took the box, his fingers tracing its surface. He opened it, his eyes scanning the contents. Marie's diary, the letters, the dried white rose. He closed the box, his heart heavy with emotion. "I will keep it safe," he said, his voice sincere. "I will honor my mother's legacy, her sacrifice, her unwavering belief in freedom." He looked at Genevieve, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You have helped me to understand my past, to connect with my family, to find my purpose. I will never forget what you have done." Genevieve smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "And you have helped me," she said, her voice soft. "You have helped me to find my own strength, my own courage, my own reason to believe in the future." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of history pressing down on them. The tapestry, the locket, the letters, the diary, they were all pieces of a puzzle that had finally been solved. But the solution had come at a cost. The war had taken its toll, on both the past and the present. Julian turned to leave, and then paused, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Genevieve," he stated, "the tapestry, it belongs with the rest of Marie's things. But it is too big. It is too obvious. It is too dangerous for me to simply take." Genevieve nodded in understanding. "But," Julian continued, you have cared for it, cleaned it, preserved it. You were drawn to unravel its secrets. Perhaps it is meant to stay with you." Genevieve was touched by the offer, a symbolic passing of the torch, a recognition of her role in uncovering the truth. It wasn't just a tapestry, it was a symbol of resilience, of remembrance, of the enduring power of love and loyalty. They both knew that the dance of deception wasn't truly over. The war continued, and the threats remained. But for now, in this ruined library, amidst the echoes of the past, a new connection had been forged, a new understanding had been reached. The whispers of the tapestry had led to a truth that would bind them together, in the fight for freedom, in the pursuit of a better future. The treasure had been found, and its true value was not in gold or information, but in the bonds it had created, the memories it had preserved, and the hope it had inspired. Chapter 13. The Night Raid. The decision to leave the tapestry in Genevieve's care felt both right and unsettling. It was a tangible link to Marie and Julian's story, a symbol of their courage and sacrifice. But it was also a target, a reminder of the danger that still lurked in the shadows. Genevieve knew that Madame Dubois, despite being in custody, had allies, connections that could still pose a threat. Julian, before departing with the resistance members and their prisoners, had warned Genevieve to be vigilant, to stay hidden, to trust no one. He had promised to return, to help her secure the tapestry, to ensure her safety. Genevieve, left alone in her small cottage, felt a growing sense of unease. The village of Valois-le-Petit, once a familiar and comforting haven, now seemed filled with hidden dangers, unseen eyes watching her every move. She spent the next few days in a state of heightened alert, her senses on edge. She barely slept, her nights filled with fragmented dreams of tapestries, lockets, and shadowy figures. She ate sparingly, her appetite diminished by anxiety. She kept the tapestry hidden, carefully wrapped in blankets and stored in a locked chest. She knew it was only a temporary solution, but it was the best she could do for now. She avoided contact with the villagers, her trust shattered by Madame Dubois' betrayal. She kept to herself, her movements cautious, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. One evening, as darkness fell, she heard a noise outside her cottage. A soft tapping on her window, followed by a hushed voice. "Genevieve, it's me. Let me in." She recognized the voice. It was Julian. She hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding with fear. Was it really him? Or was it a trap? She cautiously approached the window, peering through the curtains. She saw Julian's face, his expression urgent, his eyes filled with concern. She unbolted the door, letting him in. He quickly stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He was alone, his clothes damp and muddy, his face streaked with dirt. "What happened?" Genevieve asked, her voice trembling. "We were ambushed," Julian said, his voice low and tense. "Madame Dubois contacts, they were waiting for us." He explained that the resistance members had been attacked, several of them wounded, including himself. He had managed to escape, to make his way back to Valois-le-Petit, to warn Genevieve. "They know about the tapestry," Julian said, his voice grim. "They know you have it. They will be coming for you." Genevieve felt a wave of fear wash over her. She had known this was a possibility, but hearing it confirmed, seeing the urgency in Julian's eyes, made it all too real. "We have to leave," Julian said, his voice urgent. "We have to get out of here, now." Genevieve nodded, her mind racing. She quickly packed a small bag, including the map from the locket, and a few essential items. She couldn't take the tapestry. It was too large, too cumbersome. She would have to leave it behind for now. They left the cottage under the cover of darkness, their movements swift and silent. They avoided the main roads, sticking to the back alleys and the hidden paths. They were making their way towards the woods, their destination a safe house that Julian knew of, when they heard the sounds of shouting and gunfire. "They're here," Julian said, his voice grim. "They've found us." They quickened their pace, their hearts pounding with fear. They could hear the footsteps of their pursuers, getting closer, closer. They reached the edge of the woods, their bodies trembling with exertion. They plunged into the darkness, the trees providing a temporary cover. But their pursuers were relentless. They followed them into the woods, their shouts echoing through the trees. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Genevieve screamed, her body instinctively ducking. She saw Julian stumble, his hand clutching his arm. "I'm hit," he said, his voice strained with pain. Genevieve helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. "We have to keep going," she said, her voice urgent. They continued to run, their bodies aching, their lungs burning. They could hear their pursuers gaining on them, their shouts getting closer. They reached a clearing, a small open space in the woods. They were trapped, with nowhere to go. Suddenly, figures emerged from the trees, surrounding them. It was Madame Dubois' contacts, a group of armed men, their faces grim, their eyes filled with hatred. Leading them was the German agent, his knife gleaming in the moonlight. He smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. "It's over," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Give us the tapestry, and we might let you live." Genevieve looked at Julian, his face pale and drawn, his arm bleeding. She knew they couldn't fight them. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But she wouldn't give up. She wouldn't let them win. She stepped forward, her head held high, her eyes filled with defiance. "The tapestry is not here," she said. "You will never find it." She would protect it with her life, if necessary. The legacy of Marie and Julian, the whispers of the past, would not fall into the hands of the enemy. The night raid had reached its climax, the confrontation inevitable. The fate of the tapestry, the fate of Genevieve and Julian, hung in the balance. The echoes of the past had collided with the brutality of the present, and the outcome remained uncertain. The shadow of war had fallen upon them, and their courage was about to be tested in the crucible of fire and fear. Chapter 14. Scars of Remembrance. Genevieve's defiant declaration that the tapestry was not there, that they would never find it, hung in the air, a fragile shield against the overwhelming threat surrounding them. The German agent, his smile fading, took a step closer, his knife glinting menacingly in the moonlight. "Don't play games with me, old woman," he growled. "We know you have it. We know it's hidden somewhere in the village." "Even if I did," Genevieve retorted, her voice trembling but firm, "I would never give it to you. It belongs to France, to the memory of those who fought for freedom." The agent lunged forward, grabbing Genevieve's arm, his grip tight and painful. "Where is it?" he demanded, his voice harsh. Julian, despite his wounded arm, tried to intervene, but two of the other men restrained him, holding him back. "Let her go," Julian shouted, his voice strained with pain and anger. The agent ignored him, his focus on Genevieve. He twisted her arm, forcing her to her knees. "Tell me where it is, or you will regret it." Genevieve cried out in pain, but she refused to yield. She would not betray Marie's legacy. She would not betray Julian. She would not betray her country. Suddenly, a volley of shots rang out, shattering the night's silence. The men holding Julian released him, collapsing to the ground, their bodies riddled with bullets. The German agent, startled, released Genevieve, turning to face the source of the gunfire. Emerging from the trees were figures, armed and determined. It was the resistance, reinforcements that Julian had somehow managed to contact before their capture. A fierce firefight erupted, the clearing filled with the sounds of gunfire, shouts, and screams. Genevieve, scrambling to her feet, sought cover behind a large tree. Julian, despite his wounded arm, joined the fight, grabbing a rifle from one of the fallen men. He fought with a fierce determination, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and rage. The battle raged for what seemed like an eternity, the outcome uncertain. But the resistance fighters, fueled by their commitment to freedom and their hatred of the enemy, gradually gained the upper hand. The German agent, realizing he was defeated, tried to escape, but Julian, with a well-aimed shot, brought him down. He collapsed to the ground, his body lifeless. The remaining members of Madame Dubois' contacts, seeing their leader dead and their comrades falling around them, surrendered, their weapons clattering to the ground. The clearing fell silent, the only sounds the ragged breathing of the survivors and the soft moans of the wounded. The night raid was over, the resistance victorious. Genevieve, her body trembling, emerged from behind the tree. She rushed to Julian's side, her eyes filled with concern. "Julian," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Are you all right?" Julian nodded, his face pale and drawn, his arm bleeding profusely. "I'm alive," he said, his voice weak. "Thanks to you, and to the resistance." The resistance fighters tended to the wounded, their movements swift and efficient. They had suffered casualties, but they had also inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. Genevieve helped to bandage Julian's arm, her hands trembling. She was grateful that he was alive, that they had survived the night raid. As the adrenaline subsided, the weight of the events began to settle upon Genevieve. The violence, the fear, the constant threat, it was all too much. She felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, her body aching, her mind numb. Julian, sensing her distress, put his good arm around her, drawing her close. "It's all right, Genevieve," he said, his voice soft. "It's over. We're safe now." Genevieve leaned against him, her body trembling. She closed her eyes, seeking comfort in his presence, in his strength. They remained there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the soft sounds of the night. The scars of remembrance, both old and new, were etched deep within them, a reminder of the cost of freedom, the price of loyalty. The resistance fighters, having secured the area and tended to the wounded, prepared to leave. They would take the captured men back to their headquarters, where they would be interrogated and dealt with. Julian, despite his injuries, insisted on accompanying them. He had a responsibility to his comrades, to his cause. He promised Genevieve that he would return as soon as he was able. Genevieve watched them depart, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. She was grateful for their intervention, for their bravery, for their commitment to freedom. But she was also apprehensive about the future, about the dangers that still lurked in the shadows. She returned to her cottage, her body exhausted, her mind overwhelmed. The village, once a haven of peace and tranquility, now felt like a battleground, a place of violence and betrayal. She knew that Madame Dubois' network might still have others who would be looking for answers and for vengeance. She found the tapestry, still hidden in the locked chest. She unwrapped it, her fingers tracing the woven words, "Remember Captain Julian Moreau." The tapestry, a symbol of love, of loss, of remembrance, had survived the night raid, unscathed. But Genevieve knew that the story was far from over. The whispers of the past had led her on a dangerous journey, a journey that had tested her courage, her resilience, her very soul. And she knew that the journey was not yet complete. There were still secrets to uncover, still battles to fight, still scars to bear. The tapestry, a silent witness to history, would continue to whisper its secrets, and Genevieve, its reluctant guardian, would continue to listen, to learn, to remember. The night had been dark, but the dawn would come, and with it, the hope of a new beginning, a new chapter in the unfolding story of love, loss, and loyalty. Chapter 15. The Unveiling of Truth. The aftermath of the night raid left Genevieve physically and emotionally drained. The violence, the fear, the close call with death, it all weighed heavily on her. Julian's departure with the resistance, while necessary, left her feeling vulnerable and alone. She spent the next few days in a state of quiet contemplation, her mind replaying the events of the past weeks. The discovery of the tapestry, the unraveling of Marie and Julian's story, the confrontation with Madame Dubois and the German agent, it all felt like a dream, a surreal and dangerous journey into the past. She knew she couldn't stay in Valois-le-Petit indefinitely. It was too dangerous. Madame Dubois' network, though weakened, was still out there, and the threat of further violence remained. She decided to seek refuge in a neighboring village, a place where she was unknown, a place where she could rest, recover, and decide what to do next. She packed a small bag, including Marie's diary and the letters from Jean-Luc Dubois. She couldn't bring herself to leave the tapestry behind, despite its size and the risk it posed. It was too important, too precious, a tangible link to a story that had become a part of her. She carefully wrapped the tapestry in blankets and, with great effort, managed to carry it with her. She left her cottage under the cover of darkness, her movements cautious, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. She reached the neighboring village by dawn, her body aching, her spirits dampened by the cold and the uncertainty. She found a small, unassuming inn, a place that seemed safe and anonymous. She checked in, using a false name, her heart pounding with apprehension. She spent the next few days in her room, resting, recovering, and reading through Marie's diary and the letters. She delved deeper into their story, their love, their loss, their sacrifice. She learned more about Marie's involvement in the resistance, her bravery, her cunning, her unwavering commitment to freedom. She learned about the network of spies and collaborators that she had helped to create, the risks she had taken, the sacrifices she had made. She also learned more about Jean-Luc Dubois, his passionate love for Marie, his unwavering belief in her, his tragic death at the hands of the Prussians. She read his letters, filled with love, with longing, with promises of a future that would never be. As she read, she began to understand the true significance of the information contained within Marie's diary. It wasn't just a record of the resistance. It was a key to understanding the present, to uncovering the network of collaborators that still existed, that still posed a threat to France. She realized that Madame Du Bois' interest in the diary wasn't just about family history or personal gain. It was about protecting herself, about covering up her own involvement in the current war, her own collaboration with the enemy. Genevieve knew she had to do something. She had to find a way to use the information, to expose the truth, to bring the collaborators to justice. But she also knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed help, someone she could trust, someone with the power and influence to make a difference. She thought of Julian, of his commitment to the resistance, of his promise to return. But she didn't know when he would be back, or if he would be able to help her. She decided to take a risk. She decided to contact the authorities, to reveal the existence of Marie's diary, to offer her assistance in uncovering the network of collaborators. She wrote a letter, carefully outlining the story, omitting her own involvement, focusing on the information contained within the diary. She addressed the letter to a high-ranking official in the French government, someone she had heard of, someone who was known for his integrity and his patriotism. She mailed the letter, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. She knew she was taking a gamble, that she was putting herself at risk. But she also knew she had to do it, for Marie, for Julian, for France. She waited, her days filled with anxiety and anticipation. She continued to read Marie's diary, to immerse herself in her story, to draw strength from her courage and her resilience. Then one morning there was a knock on her door. She opened it cautiously, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the hallway were two men, dressed in civilian clothes, but with an air of authority about them. They were from the French government, from the office of the officials she had written to. They had received her letter. They were interested in her story. They wanted to see Marie's diary. Genevieve invited them in, her hands trembling. She showed them the diary, the letters, the tapestry. She told them everything, omitting nothing, revealing the truth about Madame Du Bois, about the German agent, about the network of collaborators. The officials listened intently, their faces grim, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock and concern. They examined the diary, the letters, the tapestry, their movements careful and precise. They were impressed. They were convinced. They believed her story. They thanked her for her courage, for her patriotism, for her willingness to come forward. They promised her that they would take action, that they would use the information to uncover the network of collaborators, to bring them to justice. They also promised her protection, security, a new identity, if she needed it. They understood the risks she had taken, the dangers she still faced. Genevieve felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had fulfilled her promise to Marie, to Julian, to herself. She had exposed the truth. She had brought the collaborators to light. She had honored the memory of those who had fought and died for freedom. The officials departed, taking Marie's diary and the letters with them. They left the tapestry with Genevieve, a symbol of her courage, her resilience, her unwavering belief in the truth. The unveiling of truth was complete. But what did it mean? How would it all play out with the current war raging around them? Genevieve looked at the tapestry and vowed to protect this story, and herself, with all she had left. Chapter 16. A Promise Broken. The departure of the government officials, while relief, also left Genevieve with a sense of emptiness. She had entrusted them with Marie's diary, with the key to uncovering the network of collaborators, but she had also relinquished a part of herself, a connection to a story that had consumed her for weeks. She remained in the neighboring village, under the protection of the authorities, her identity concealed, her movements restricted. She waited, her days filled with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. She waited for news, for updates, for some indication that the information she had provided was making a difference. She spent her time rereading Marie's letters, tracing the faded ink, immersing herself in the past. She felt a growing sense of connection to Marie, a kinship born of shared grief and a shared understanding of the devastating impact of war. She also thought of Julian, of his bravery, his sacrifice, his unwavering commitment to the resistance. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, if he was safe. She longed for his return, for his reassurance, for his friendship. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no word from Julian, no news from the authorities. Genevieve began to fear the worst. Had something happened to him? Had the information she provided been compromised? Had the collaborators discovered her whereabouts? Her anxiety grew, her sleep disrupted by nightmares, her days filled with a sense of foreboding. She felt isolated, alone, cut off from the world, from the story that had become her life. Then one evening there was a knock on her door. She opened it cautiously, her heart pounding with apprehension. Standing in the hallway was a young woman, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with tears. She was a member of the resistance, a courier, sent by Julian. "Genevieve Moreau?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. Genevieve nodded, her heart sinking. She knew, instinctively, that the news was not good. The woman handed Genevieve a letter, its envelope sealed with wax, bearing Julian's familiar handwriting. "I'm so sorry," the woman said, her voice choked with emotion. "He didn't make it." Genevieve's world shattered.
Julian dead.
The brave, compassionate, determined man who had become her friend, her confidant, her protector gone. She took the letter, her hands trembling. She sat down heavily on the bed, her body numb with shock. She opened the letter, her eyes scanning the words, her mind struggling to comprehend their meaning. The letter was brief, written in haste, just before Julian had embarked on the mission that had cost him his life. He wrote of his love for France, of his commitment to the resistance, of his unwavering belief in freedom. He also wrote of Genevieve, of his gratitude for her help, of his admiration for her courage, of his hope that she would be safe. He asked her to continue the fight, to honor Marie's memory, to ensure that the truth was revealed, that the collaborators were brought to justice. And then, he wrote of a promise he had made to Marie, a promise he had failed to keep. He wrote of a secret hidden within the tapestry, a secret that he had not been able to uncover before his death. "The white rose," he wrote. "It is more than just a symbol of love. It is a key, a clue to a hidden message, a message that Marie entrusted to me, a message that I have failed to decipher. Find the white rose, Genevieve. Find the truth." Genevieve's tears flowed freely, her grief overwhelming. Julian was gone, his promise broken, his life sacrificed for the cause of freedom. But his words, his final plea, ignited a spark within her, a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to honor his memory, to fulfill his unfinished task. She looked at the tapestry, hanging on the wall, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped her. She remembered the white roses, woven into the borders of the tapestry, sometimes whole, sometimes with a broken stem. She approached the tapestry, her fingers tracing the woven threads. She examined the white roses one by one, searching for any anomaly, any irregularity. She found it, a white rose, near the bottom of the tapestry, its stem broken, its petals slightly detached from the surrounding fabric. She carefully pulled at the petals, her heart pounding with anticipation. The petals came loose, revealing a small, hidden compartment behind the rose. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a tiny, rolled-up piece of parchment. Genevieve carefully removed the parchment, her hands trembling. She unrolled it gingerly, its surface brittle and fragile. It was a single, handwritten sentence, written in Marie's elegant script. "The truth lies with the lion." Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. The lion, the rampant lion on the crest, woven into the corner of the tapestry. The crest that she had sketched in her notebook, the crest that had puzzled her for so long. The promise broken, the truth that still remained hidden. The white rose led to a clue, and Genevieve had to continue. Julian's death gave his final message such gravity, Genevieve realized that it must be obeyed. The collaborators might be exposed, but there was something more. The lion. And Genevieve vowed to find out what it all meant. Chapter 17. The Escape. The truth lies with the lion. Marie's cryptic message, hidden within the white rose on the tapestry, echoed in Genevieve's mind. The rampant lion on the crest, the symbol she had struggled to decipher, was now the key to unlocking the final secret, the truth that Julian had died trying to uncover. Genevieve, still reeling from the news of Julian's death, felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to honor his memory, to fulfill his unfinished task. She knew she had to return to the Chateau de Valois, to the library, to the tapestry, to the crest with the rampant lion. But she also knew she couldn't do it alone. She was a marked woman, hunted by Madame Du Bois' network, vulnerable and exposed. She needed help, protection, someone she could trust. She thought of the resistance, of the young courier who had delivered Julian's letter. But she didn't know how to contact them, how to reach them without putting herself and them at risk. She decided to take a risk. She decided to return to Valois-le-Petit, to her cottage, to the place where it had all begun. She knew it was dangerous, but she felt drawn back, compelled by the tapestry, by Marie's message, by Julian's sacrifice. She packed a small bag, including the tapestry, carefully wrapped in blankets. She left the inn under the cover of darkness, her movements cautious, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. She traveled by night, avoiding the main roads, sticking to the back alleys and the hidden paths. It was a long and arduous journey, her body aching, her spirits dampened by the cold and the uncertainty. She reached the outskirts of Valois-le-Petit by dawn, her destination, her small cottage, looming in the distance. The village, once a familiar and comforting haven, now seemed filled with hidden dangers, unseen eyes watching her every move. She approached her cottage cautiously, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. She found it untouched, seemingly undisturbed. The villagers, either unaware of her return or wary of her presence, kept their distance. She entered the cottage, locking the door behind her. She unwrapped the tapestry, hanging it on the wall, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the drab surroundings. She examined the crest, the rampant lion and the fleur-de-lis, her fingers tracing their outlines. She had sketched the crest in her notebook, but she hadn't been able to identify the family, the lineage, the connection to Marie and Julian. She realized that the answer must lie in the chateau, in its history, in its archives, if any had survived the war. She had to return to the Chateau de Valois, to the ruined library, to the place where she had first found the tapestry. But she couldn't go during the day. It was too risky. Madame Du Bois' network, though weakened, was still out there, and the chateau was likely being watched. She decided to wait until nightfall, to make her escape under the cover of darkness. She spent the day resting, preparing, and planning her route. As darkness fell, she heard a noise outside her cottage. A soft tapping on her window, followed by a hushed voice. "Genevieve, it's me. Let me in." She recognized the voice. It was the young resistance courier, the woman who had delivered Julian's letter. Genevieve cautiously opened the door. The woman quickly stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She was accompanied by 2 other resistance members, both armed and determined. "We know about Julian," the woman said, her voice low and urgent. "We're here to help you." Genevieve felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. The resistance, despite their losses, was still fighting, still committed to the cause. They explained that they had been tracking Madame Du Bois' network, that they knew about the chateau, that they were planning a raid to capture any remaining collaborators and to secure any remaining evidence. They offered Genevieve their protection, their assistance in returning to the chateau, in uncovering the final secret. Genevieve accepted their offer, her heart filled with gratitude. She explained Marie's message, the truth lies with the lion, and her belief that the answer lay in the chateau's archives. They planned their escape, their movements carefully coordinated, their strategy precise. They would leave under the cover of darkness, avoiding the main roads, sticking to the woods and the overgrown gardens. They left the cottage, their steps silent, their senses alert. They made their way towards the chateau, the ruined building looming in the distance, its silhouette a dark and ominous presence against the night sky. They reached the chateau, avoiding the main entrance, entering through a hidden passage that the resistance members knew of. They made their way to the ruined library, their weapons drawn, their bodies tense with anticipation. The library was dark and silent, the only sounds the soft rustling of the wind through the shattered windows and the distant echoes of the ongoing war. The tapestry, illuminated by the faint glow of their lanterns, seemed to pulse with a hidden life. Genevieve pointed to the crest, the rampant lion. "The answer is there," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Somewhere in the chateau's archives." The resistance members began their search, their movements swift and efficient. They searched through the rubble, the debris, the remnants of books and documents, searching for any clue, any hint that might lead them to the truth. The escape had led them back to the beginning, and Genevieve knew that this time there would be no turning back. The lion held the answer, and they were about to unleash it. Chapter 18. Across the barbed wire. The search of the ruined library proved fruitless. The chateau's archives, if they had ever existed, had been destroyed by the war, reduced to rubble and ashes. Genevieve, her heart sinking, felt a wave of despair wash over her. Had she been wrong? Was Marie's message a dead end? The resistance members, however, were not ready to give up. They knew the chateau held secrets, that Madame Dubois' network had been using it as a base of operations, that there must be something hidden somewhere within its walls. "There has to be another way," the young courier, whose name Genevieve had learned was Isabel, said, her voice determined. "Another entrance, a hidden room, something." They continued their search, expanding their focus beyond the library, exploring the other ruined rooms and corridors of the chateau. They moved cautiously, their weapons drawn, their senses alert. They discovered a hidden passage behind a collapsed wall, a narrow, dark tunnel that led deep into the bowels of the chateau. They followed the passage, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the damp stone walls. The passage led them to a large, underground chamber, a hidden room that had survived the war intact. The chamber was filled with crates, boxes, and barrels, a makeshift storage area for Madame Dubois' network. But it was something else that caught Genevieve's attention. On one wall of the chamber, carved into the stone, was a large, elaborate crest. It was the same crest as the one on the tapestry, the rampant lion and the fleur-de-lis. But this crest was different. It was larger, more detailed, and beneath it, carved into the stone, was a name. Armand Dubois. Genevieve's breath caught in her throat.
Dubois.
The same name as Captain Jean-Luc Dubois, Marie's lover. The same name as Madame Dubois. The same name as Julien, who was secretly the son of Marie. And the same name as Monsieur Dubois, the supposed librarian. But that was supposed to be a distant, almost insignificant connection. What did this mean? Armand Dubois, Isabel said, her voice thoughtful. "I've heard that name before. He was a nobleman, a wealthy landowner, who lived in this region centuries ago. He must be an ancestor," Genevieve said, her mind racing. An ancestor of Captain Jean-Luc Dubois, of Madame Dubois, of Julien, and possibly a more direct connection to the helpful librarian. But what was the connection? What was the significance of the name? What was the truth that lay with the lion? They examined the crest more closely, searching for any clue, any hint that might shed light on its mystery. They noticed that the lion's paw was raised, as if pointing to something. They followed the direction of the paw, their eyes scanning the wall. They found it. A small, almost imperceptible crack in the stone, a hidden seam that outlined a rectangular shape. It was a door, a secret door, concealed within the wall. They tried to open the door, but it was locked, sealed shut. They searched for a key, a mechanism, anything that might unlock it. One of the resistance members, a skilled locksmith, examined the door, his fingers probing the crack, searching for a hidden latch. He found it. A small, almost invisible button, concealed within the carving of the lion's paw. He pressed the button, and with a click, the door swung open, revealing a small, dark room. They entered the room, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the walls. The room was sparsely furnished, containing only a small table, a chair, and a large, iron chest. On the table lay a single, leather-bound book. Genevieve recognized it instantly. It was a family history, a record of the Du Bois lineage, dating back centuries. She opened the book, her hands trembling. She scanned the pages, her eyes searching for any mention of Marie, of Julien, of Captain Jean-Luc Du Bois. She found it, a chapter devoted to Armand Du Bois, the nobleman who had lived in the chateau centuries ago. And within that chapter, a small, almost insignificant paragraph. Armand Du Bois, the paragraph read, had a secret that he took to his grave. A secret that was said to be hidden within the chateau, protected by the lion. A secret that could bring down empires, topple governments, change the course of history. It was a coded message he created and, it was rumored, shared with very few. Genevieve's heart pounded with anticipation. The secret. The truth that lay with the lion. It was here, in this book, in this room, in this chateau. But the paragraph didn't reveal the secret itself. It only hinted at its existence, its power, its potential to change the world. And it stated the secret was coded. Genevieve realized she was close to the truth and turned toward the iron chest. It was no doubt locked. "Can you open this?" she asked the locksmith. He nodded and went to work. Within minutes, he had the chest opened. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small stack of encoded letters and a metal cylinder. Genevieve looked closer. The cylinder was a complex device covered in dials, symbols, and numbers. Genevieve felt tears welling up. This was it. The truth that Marie had hidden, that Julien had died trying to uncover, that Madame Du Bois had sought to exploit. It was a truth so profound, so dangerous, that it had been hidden for centuries, protected by a code, guarded by a lion. But what was the secret? How did the coded letters and the cylinder relate to the present war? And, more importantly, how could Genevieve use this knowledge to help France? She had crossed the barbed wire, metaphorically speaking, between the past and the present. But the journey was far from over. The truth was within her grasp, but its power, its implications, were still unknown. And the danger, she knew, was far from over. Chapter 19. The Reckoning. The discovery of the coded letters and the complex cylindrical device within the iron chest marked a turning point in Genevieve's journey. The truth that Marie Moreau had hidden, the truth that Julien had died trying to uncover, was finally within reach. But the weight of this discovery was immense. It was a secret that had the potential to shift the balance of power, to expose a network of collaborators that reached far beyond Madame Du Bois and her German agent. Genevieve, surrounded by the resistance members, carefully examined the contents of the chest. The letters, written in a complex cipher, were addressed to various individuals, some with names she recognized from Marie's diary, others unknown. The cylindrical device, intricate and unfamiliar, was clearly a key to decoding the messages, a tool created by Armand Du Bois centuries ago to protect his secret. "We need to get this to someone who can decipher it," Genevieve said, her voice filled with urgency. "Someone who understands codes, ciphers, someone we can trust." Isabelle, the young resistance courier, nodded. "We have contacts in Paris, experts in cryptography, working with the Allied forces.
We can get it to them."
They carefully repacked the chest, ensuring the letters and the cylinder were secure. They left the hidden chamber, sealing the secret door behind them. They made their way back through the chateau, their movements swift and silent. They emerged from the chateau, the night air cold and crisp. They were about to make their escape when they heard the sounds of approaching vehicles, the rumble of engines, the screech of tires. Headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the area around the chateau. They were surrounded. It was Madame Du Bois' network, remnants of her collaborators, reinforced by German soldiers. They had been tracked, betrayed, their escape route cut off. "We're trapped," one of the resistance members said, his voice grim. Genevieve, her heart pounding with fear, clutched the chest tightly. She wouldn't let them have it. She wouldn't let Marie's secret, Julien's sacrifice, be in vain. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, his voice booming through the night. It was Monsieur Du Bois, the supposed librarian, the man who had claimed to be a distant relative of Madame Du Bois. But he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by armed men, villagers from Valois-le-Petit, men and women who had been secretly working with the resistance, waiting for the moment to strike. "You are surrounded, Madame Dubois," Monsieur Dubois shouted, his voice filled with authority. "Surrender now, and no one else has to die." Madame Dubois, her face a mask of rage and defiance, emerged from one of the vehicles. She was accompanied by several German officers, their faces grim, their weapons drawn. "You traitor," Madame Dubois spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You were one of us." "I was never one of you," Monsieur Dubois retorted. "I am a Dubois, yes. But I am a descendant of Armand Dubois, the man who created the code, the man who believed in freedom, in justice, in loyalty to France. I have been waiting for this moment, waiting for the opportunity to expose your treachery, to bring you to justice." He revealed that his name was not, in fact, Dubois. It was a cover, a disguise he had adopted to infiltrate Madame Dubois' network, to gather intelligence, to prepare for this reckoning. He was a member of French intelligence, working undercover, assigned to unravel the secrets of the tapestry and the Dubois family. He had known about Genevieve, about her search for the truth, all along. He had been watching her, protecting her, guiding her, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. A tense standoff ensued, the two sides facing each other, their weapons drawn, their fates hanging in the balance. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of the war. Then, suddenly, the battle erupted. Gunfire shattered the night, screams and shouts filling the air. The villagers, fueled by their hatred of the collaborators and their loyalty to France, fought with fierce determination. The resistance members, trained and experienced, fought with precision and skill. Genevieve, caught in the crossfire, sought cover behind a ruined wall, clutching the chest tightly. She watched in horror as the battle raged around her, the forces of good and evil clashing in a brutal and deadly dance. The fighting continued for what seemed like an eternity, the outcome uncertain. But gradually, the tide began to turn. The villagers and the resistance fighters, outnumbered but not outmatched, began to gain the upper hand. Madame Dubois, seeing her network collapsing around her, her dreams of power and wealth slipping away, made a desperate attempt to escape. But Monsieur Dubois, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness, intercepted her. "It's over, madame," he said, his voice firm. "Your treachery ends here." Madame Dubois, her face contorted with rage, lunged at him with a hidden knife. But Monsieur Dubois, anticipating her move, disarmed her, his movements swift and decisive. The remaining collaborators, seeing their leader captured, their comrades falling, surrendered, their weapons clattering to the ground. The German soldiers, realizing they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, retreated, their vehicles speeding away into the night. The battle was over. The reckoning had come. The forces of good had triumphed, but at a cost. Several villagers and resistance fighters had been wounded, some fatally. The ground was littered with the bodies of the dead, a grim testament to the brutality of war. Genevieve, emerging from her hiding place, her body trembling, felt the wave of relief wash over her. She had survived. The secret was safe. The collaborators had been defeated. The truth was about to be revealed. The reckoning was complete, and the price had been paid. But a new era was about to begin. And Genevieve found herself, unexpectedly, at its very center. Chapter 20. A New Dawn. The aftermath of the battle at the Château de Valois was a scene of both devastation and relief. The bodies of the fallen were respectfully removed, the wounded tended to, and the captured collaborators secured. Genevieve, though shaken by the violence, emerged physically unharmed, the iron chest containing Marie Moreau's secret still clutched tightly in her arms. Monsieur Dubois, or rather, Agent Dubois, as he was now properly addressed, approached Genevieve, his face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. "You did well, Madame Moreau," he said, his voice sincere. "You've played a crucial role in uncovering a network of collaborators that has plagued France for far too long." Genevieve nodded, her heart still heavy with the loss of Julian and the others who had sacrificed their lives for freedom. It was Marie's story, she said, her voice trembling. And Julian's courage. I was merely a vessel, a messenger. Agent Dubois smiled gently. You are more than that, Madame Moreau. You are the catalyst, the spark that ignited the flame of truth. And now, that flame will burn brightly, illuminating the darkness and exposing the treachery that has festered within our nation. He explained that the coded letters and the cylindrical device would be taken to Paris, where experts in cryptography would work to decipher their contents. He assured her that the information they contained would be used to dismantle the remaining collaborator network, to bring the traitors to justice, and to strengthen the Allied war effort. Genevieve, relieved that the secret was in safe hands, felt a sense of closure, a sense of having fulfilled her promise to Marie and Julian. But she also knew that the war was far from over, that the fight for freedom continued, that the scars of loss and betrayal would linger. The resistance members and the villagers, their ranks depleted but their spirits unbroken, gathered around Genevieve, offering their gratitude and their support. They had witnessed her courage, her resilience, her unwavering commitment to the truth. They had seen her transform from a grieving widow into a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in the darkness. Isabel, the young resistance courier, approached Genevieve, her eyes filled with admiration. You are an inspiration, Madame Moreau, she said, her voice sincere. You have shown us that even in the darkest of times, one person can make a difference. Genevieve, touched by their words, felt a surge of emotion. She had found a new family, a new purpose, a new reason to believe in the future. She had found her strength, her courage, her voice, in the midst of war and devastation. As the dawn broke, casting a golden glow over the ruined chateau, Genevieve made a decision. She would not return to her solitary life, to her quiet cottage, to her grief-stricken existence. She would join the resistance. She would continue the fight. She would honor the memory of Marie and Julian. She would work towards a future where freedom and justice prevailed. Agent Dubois, recognizing her determination and her potential, offered her a position within the resistance, a role that would utilize her knowledge of the local area, her understanding of the tapestry's secrets, and her unwavering commitment to the cause. Genevieve accepted, her heart filled with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. She knew it would be dangerous, that she would face challenges and risks, but she was ready. She had been forged in the crucible of war, tempered by loss, strengthened by the whispers of the past. The tapestry, a silent witness to history, a symbol of love, loss, and remembrance, would remain in her care. A reminder of the journey she had undertaken, a testament to the power of truth, a beacon of hope for the future. As the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the landscape with a promise of a new day, Genevieve stood among her new comrades, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The war raged on. The battles continued, but a new dawn had broken, a dawn of hope, of resilience, of unwavering commitment to freedom. The whispers of the tapestry had been heard, the secrets revealed, the reckoning complete. But the story was far from over. It was a story that would continue to be written, in the hearts and minds of those who fought for a better world, a world where justice prevailed, where love triumphed, where the echoes of the past inspired the actions of the present. And Genevieve Moreau, the unassuming widow who had stumbled upon a hidden tapestry, was now a part of that story, a vital thread in the fabric of a new dawn. The future was uncertain, but her path was clear. Epilogue. The years following the war were a time of rebuilding, of healing, of remembering. France, scarred but not broken, slowly emerged from the ashes of conflict, its people determined to forge a new future, a future built on the foundations of freedom, justice, and peace. Genevieve Moreau, no longer the solitary widow, became an integral part of the resistance, her courage and her knowledge proving invaluable in the ongoing fight against the remnants of the collaborator network. She worked tirelessly, alongside Agent Dubois and Isabel, helping to identify and apprehend those who had betrayed their country, ensuring that the truth was revealed, that justice was served. The coded letters and the cylindrical device, deciphered by experts in Paris, yielded a treasure trove of information, exposing a network of collaborators that reached the highest echelons of French society. The revelations sent shockwaves through the nation, leading to arrests, trials, and a reckoning with the past. The tapestry, Genevieve's constant companion, became a symbol of hope, a reminder of the sacrifices made, a testament to the power of truth. It was displayed in a museum in Paris, a tribute to Marie Moreau, to Captain Julien Moreau, to all those who had fought and died for freedom. Genevieve, though she never fully escaped the shadows of her past, found solace in her work, in her friendships, in her commitment to the cause. She never forgot Philip, her beloved husband, lost in the earlier war. But she also learned to love again, to find joy in the present, to embrace the future. She and Agent Dubois, their bond forged in the crucible of war, developed a deep and lasting friendship, a relationship built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and a common purpose. They worked together, side by side, for many years, their lives intertwined, their destinies forever linked by the whispers of the tapestry. Isabelle, the young resistance courier, became like a daughter to Genevieve, a symbol of the next generation, a generation that would inherit the legacy of freedom, a generation that would carry the torch of hope into the future. Genevieve, as she grew older, often visited the museum in Paris, where the tapestry was displayed. She would stand before it, her fingers tracing the woven words, "Remember Captain Julien Moreau," her heart filled with a mixture of sadness and pride. She would remember Marie, the brave and resourceful woman who had sacrificed everything for her brother, for her country. She would remember Julien, the courageous soldier who had died too young, his promise unfulfilled. She would remember all those who had fought and died for freedom, their names etched in the annals of history, their spirits forever alive in the hearts of those who remembered. And she would remember her own journey, her transformation from a grieving widow into a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in the darkness. She had found her strength, her courage, her voice, in the midst of war and devastation. She had uncovered a secret, exposed a network of collaborators, and helped to build a better future for France. The tapestry, a silent witness to history, continued to whisper its secrets, its threads weaving together the past, the present, and the future. It was a story of love, of loss, of remembrance, of resilience, of the enduring power of the human spirit. And as Genevieve stood before it, her eyes filled with tears, she knew that the story was far from over. It was a story that would continue to be told, generation after generation, a story that would inspire, that would challenge, that would remind us all of the importance of freedom, of justice, of the enduring power of love and loyalty. The war had ended, but the tapestry's message remained, a timeless testament to the human spirit's capacity for both great darkness and extraordinary light. And Genevieve, the woman who had listened to its whispers, would forever be a part of its enduring legacy.